there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ајде, мајката!
Господ ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
Macedonians recently celebrated the 150th birthday of Macedonian hero Goce Delchev. But some Macedonians, mostly governmental types and some NGOs from the colorful revolution, seem fine with Bulgaria's position that Delchev was a, quote, Bulgarian, unquote, and that Macedonian history really is Bulgarian history and, well, you know where this leads. In the meantime, the Macedonian government is trying to push these so-called working groups between the two countries on issues such as the economy, trade, innovation, and more, in their public relations and in an effort to attempt to draw public opinion away from the fact that the Bulgarian government, despite its new leadership, still is going to insist on their demands that Macedonians abdicate their history and language to Bulgaria. The Macedonian Content Farmers believe wholeheartedly that trade and economic cooperation between countries is a good thing. But the entire root of the problem is that Bulgaria still insists on Macedonians denying their own identity, and the Bulgarian government will continue to do this. Back home in Macedonia, the government tried to introduce a new law which would, essentially, allow citizens to civilly sue each other for, quote, negative opinions, unquote. After an immense amount of blowback, the government's Ministry of Justice walked this back. But they will likely try again as a part of the left's increasing demand that speech that they find, quote, offensive, unquote, should be banned. They are bloody little buggers, and if they find that offensive, then they are not fit to be adults, let alone have any position of authority. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin and Jason in Skopje, Macedonia.
If it had been 48 hours beforehand, I would have said, coming to you from the foot of Vodno Mountain in Skopje, the Republic of Macedonia. Yes.
Yeah, Jason was here.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was in Macedonia for 2 weeks. I come for the weather, It's just beautiful this time of year.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it was tough though. I mean, you were kind of down and out. A number of other friends were down and out or gone, and so anyway, it was good to be there. Always good to be in Macedonia. That's for sure. So.
For a desert dweller, maybe winter in Europe is interesting.
Well,
there was gloomy here and
there was one day when I was there and it was snowing. So I just went out in the morning and walked around on the Ploštad, in the snow, and because I don't get to do that here.
Yeah, didn't even complain that the snow is not cleaned up.
Yeah, it's and most of that day, most of the snow had melted by the afternoon. But it was kind of nice, but. More importantly, obviously, just to be able to see family and friends, at least some. I mean, I figured, Cvetin, if I were to try and see everybody I know at least once, that would take probably 4 to 6 weeks. So, anyway, I will be back as always. So, and I was there going back to the monologue, I was there for the 150th birthday of Macedonian hero Goce Delchev. I was thinking of actually going up to Sveti Spas. But then I thought, there's going to be a lot of police around there, cameras, everything else. So I did not make it up there. But so the Bulgarians sent a delegation that laid flowers, and let's see, the Prime Minister Kovacevsky was out of town. The Foreign Minister was out of town. So and Stevo Pendorovsky, the president, I believe, went to the. Did he go to Sveti Spas?
Yes.
I can't remember. Okay.
He went to Sveti Spas, and the head of the delegation, the president is his own institution. Mm-hmm. The head of the government's delegation was Artan Grubi, who is very famous for, causing that major incident, like 100 meters from where the church is, on the slope of the Kala fortress, where when Gruevski initiated the reconstruction of a church that was excavated and found in the courtyard of the fortress. And the Albanians started an uproar because they didn't want to have like a Christian, even though it was going to be just a museum, not a religious object, a religious shrine. The Albanians started protests. They demolished. To this day, you have like the partly demolished skeleton of the museum church.
Right.
And Artan Grubi was leading this major incident between Macedonians and Albanians in Skopje, and now he was appointed by the government as head of the delegation to go honor Goce Delchev because the prime minister fled the country and went to Brussels on the anniversary, even though it's such a major event now, with the Bulgarians demanding that we accept a joint honoring of Goce Delchev as a joint shared Macedonian and Bulgarian hero. And the government is, by and large, willing to accept these demands.
That incident up on Kale with the church, that was kind of wasn't that the initial rise of Artan Grubi, kind of?
Yeah.
That's kind of when he, I know that the Dutch embassy kind of made him into what he is today. He was a football hooligan, and they kind of picked him out of the crowd, dusted him off, cleaned him up, put a suit on him, put some lipstick on him, and then sent him out to be the troublemaker that he continues to be.
Yeah.
Well, that's too bad. And of course, the Bulgarians sent a delegation also to Svetispas. I don't know if that was the foreign minister or not, but
they had the foreign minister and other officials. Yeah.
and other officials, right? Yeah. So the Macedonian government has basically agreed to celebrate jointly with the Bulgarian government, Goce Delchev. And at the same time, of course, the Bulgarian government, the quote new Bulgarian government, led by their prime minister Kirill Petkov, who went to Harvard. So since he went to Harvard, he's supposed to be a wonder kid. Is pushing these so-called working groups, which again, as I mentioned in the monologue, is fine. Nothing wrong with working groups talking about trade and economic cooperation, innovation, etc. But that is kind of it takes away from the root cause of all of this that we've been talking about for, it seems like, years now. Ever since the Greeks got what they wanted, we've been talking about the Bulgarians and what they want, or demand, I should say. And so they've got these working groups going back and forth. And this thing about the airline I saw the other day, the flights between Sofia and Skopje are supposed to start in March by an airline called Gulliver, I believe, which is Bulgarian, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a tourist agency.
Tourist agency, yeah. But, the flights will be subsidized, of course. And, Wizz Air received some subsidies from the Macedonian government under the previous government and this government for their flights, of course. But it seems to be more of a top-down thing than a bottom-up thing. The market should demand that there need be flights between the two capitals. It shouldn't be the government forcing that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, if those flights actually do occur, and we'll see if anybody's actually on them and how long they last, etc. But these working groups, again, are really kind of, I think, sure, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They're designed to increase, increase the cooperation between the two countries on these issues that we talked about. But the root cause, the root problem actually is still there, of Bulgarians insisting that Macedonians basically abdicate their history and language to Bulgaria. I think, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the big issue right now seems to be with the Bulgarians demanding that they be recognized as a constituent people within the constitution of Macedonia's constitution. And I noticed this morning on the Twitters that Dimitar Bechev, the Bulgarian analyst, I think he's in North Carolina, said that, yes, if the Macedonians accept this, then the Bulgarians will be able to sell it to, the Bulgarian government can sell it to their own people and begin talks. Which is okay, but why can't the Macedonians then be a constituent people in the Bulgarian constitution?
Yeah, we have no problem accepting this for other countries. So, for example, at the moment, Croatia actually acknowledges the Macedonians as their constituent nation, even though we do not yet have the Croats in our constitution. Now, of course, Croatia wants to dilute the fact that it has a large Serbian minority, many of whom were expelled after the war. They started practically in the 90s, but so they want to add as many, to the list of the minorities. Bulgaria has a different approach. It does not acknowledge anybody as a minority. It actually bans you from having a political party or movement on ethnic basis. So the Turkish party has to be called the Party of Movements of Freedom and something like that, even though they would much rather be called like the Turkish party.
Because they are.
Or something. Well, yeah.
Right.
So they're not allowed to state their affiliation, but then Bulgaria has, so in a sense, Bulgaria has a stricter approach to these policies, but then it demands that Macedonia lives up to its much more relaxed and a much more generous approach to minority rights. So a country which has zero respect or zero tolerance for minorities in its own territory demands that another country accepts fully the Bulgarian minority, and it would not be a problem if there was some reciprocity, so we can acknowledge the Serbs because the Serbs acknowledged us, we can acknowledge the Albanians because the Albanians acknowledge us, but we have not yet registered a Greek party or a Greek organization because Greece also has a very strict policy of non-acknowledgement, non-recognition of the Macedonian minority. So there has to be some kind of like a give and take. We would recognize the church very freely, but we did not famously recognize the Serbian church, and we actually, had this forced, really, out there persecution of the Macedonian bishop who sided with the Serbs and was appointed by them as the Archbishop of Macedonia. Our courts put him in prison because Serbia does not recognize our language, our minority, our everything except our church. So we said, okay, we do not recognize your church. You cannot have a church in Macedonia since you don't recognize the Macedonian church. So it's not just a policy against the Bulgarians, it's a common sense approach. If you do not give us this right, we do not give you the same right. The government turned to VMRO because the government does not have the vote to amend the constitution, barring, again, arrests of opposition members of parliament. So they're now openly asking the opposition to support them on this. Mickovsky came out and said, okay, we might consider this, even without reciprocity. So the first path would be obviously reciprocal acknowledgement of minorities, however many or few people want this right in both countries. And, since we know how the Bulgarians are, we can either accept this on a written guarantee from... So we can vote for this, give Kovachevsky in parliament the votes he needs to amend the constitution. But if Bulgaria gives written guarantees that this is the last demand and that afterwards it will be smooth sailing on their part, no veto in the EU, no blockades, or that, he added let them start respecting the court sentences by the European Court of Human Rights, which Macedonian organizations in Bulgaria, they constantly sue Bulgaria because it keeps dragging out or denying their simple request to get registered, like go to the registry office and say, I have an association for this or that or the other, and everybody is accepted, but if you put Macedonian in the organization, you're immediately denied. So there's like a dozen of these sentences that Bulgaria ignores. Or Mickovsky said, just come and, apologize for the deportation of the Macedonian Jews in the Holocaust. So these are all big asks from the Bulgarians. I doubt that they would accept anything, but I don't see how they can hope that they will get quick acknowledgement in the constitution of the Bulgarian minority. And then there is a whole issue in which the Bulgarians mainly say, listen, what we're asking for is stupid. Not because it's stupid, but because on these hypocritical grounds, but because we want to claim all the Macedonians as crypto-Bulgarians, as recently, Bulgarians who have recently, tried to adopt a new identity, and we should not push for a designation which in Macedonia is reserved for a minority, because then they would have 2,000 people maybe declaring themselves as ethnic Bulgarians in the census. they would have like 100,000 people who claim citizenship, but these are all living in Germany or Italy now, because this is the main reason why they claim the citizenship. They would say, okay, yes, we feel as Bulgarians, whatever, just give me the document. Very few of them actually remain in Macedonia or live in Bulgaria or are active politically as Bulgarians. So Bulgarians say, no, let's just keep this issue open-ended and eventually push for absorption of the whole of the Macedonians as Bulgarians. So yeah, it's a big mess.
Always is. And of course the fact remains, and this is true in life, it's true throughout all of history, is that once you give in, once you try to appease the aggressor with one thing, the aggressor will continue to ask more and more. That's just a fact. And it doesn't matter if the Bulgarians give a written document saying, yes, this is the last thing we'll ask for. It isn't. It won't be. They'll always ask for more. And again, as we've talked about many times in this podcast, and as I've written, the 30 some odd chapters of the EU acquis, I think, that has to be, each chapter has to be opened, negotiated, closed, and then voted on by the EU countries, and Bulgaria could object at any step along the way. So, and they will, and the Greeks will as well, because this is something we haven't talked about in a while, I think, but I've been reading here and there that the Greek government is not happy with the implementation of the so-called Prespa agreement, and will be demanding more and more from Macedonia, even if Macedonia finally does get a date to begin EU accession talks. Both countries, both governments, Greece, Bulgaria, are going to continue demanding more and more from Macedonia and the Macedonians, and that's just a fact. It's all in the name of quote-unquote EU values. Of course, the EU has values, but it doesn't have virtues, and that's a thing. I think I'm going to work up an article on that, trying to defining the difference between the two. But anyway, that's going to continue, and I see that they're talking about early summer for an agreement or so. But in the meantime, though, we do have you mentioned something. Sorry about the Macedonians that actually have a Bulgarian passport, and we have the results of the census are going to be made, I believe, next month in March, and of course the Bulgarians are going to raise holy hell when there aren't 100,000 plus Bulgarians listed in the census. There'll be what you said, something like 1,000, maybe less.
I think so. Yeah, I think just a very small number.
Yeah, exactly.
Expressed this
because
we don't know for sure,
right,
because it's the results are still
pending,
not published. But yeah.
Well, there's that, and then of course on the other hand, there's going to be issues with the number of ethnic Macedonians, ethnic Albanians, etc., and those that are in the country versus out of the country, because during the census you could be anywhere on planet Earth and still register, which is the census is supposed to count the number of people in a given location at a given time, not the people outside of the country. But because Dewey was running the foreign ministry was Dewey, they had a lot of power over that. And so anyway,
the Bulgarians actually chilled a lot of this positive movement that was made when practically we had Petkov visit Skopje, then Kovachevsky and half of the government went to Sofia, set up these work groups, some of which might actually work on something useful, like infrastructure, even though the best approach for Bulgaria would be just to let us join the EU, and then we can jointly suck on the EU taxpayers' teeth and actually build the roads we need and the railway with their money, not spend our own money to do it. But then he said, as this was all progressing, he talks about we can't allow Goca Delchev to divide us, even as he was honoring Goca Delchev in Sofia, and then went for a procession with torches. It was pretty, out there in Blagoevgrad, the capital of Pirin, Macedonia, with the president Radov. So they had all their patriotic organizations there go to the grave of, I think, Delchev's father, or not real sure, who is buried there. And this was all like a moderate approach mixed in with some, let's say, patriotism, nationalism on their part. But then he said, listen, we let them start the accession talks. It's going to take them 15 years anyway. So 15, 1-5,
Yeah.
which is a lot. I mean, and people are just saying, what's the point of all of this? Even with all these concessions, and then we're still talking about a decade and a half of waiting for anything to happen. So practically we have a much more immediate and much more likely outcome, which is now openly favored by the US State Department, by the Soros guys, that we join Serbia and Albania and Kosovo and Bosnia and Montenegro in a Yugoslavia without the good parts, but with the Albanians in it, and call it Open Society Balkans, Open Balkans.
Sponsored by George Soros.
And yeah, exactly. And the Bulgarians are becoming concerned about this. They fear that Macedonia will end up under Serbia again. But they're largely contributed to this outcome. So what can you do?
Oh, yeah. And again, at the end of the day, people just want to, be able to hold a job down and make some money and send their kids to school and put food on the table and maybe take a vacation twice a year and basically be left alone to enjoy themselves. But they will not be allowed to do that because little people run the government in Macedonia and other governments in the region. Speaking of jobs, real quick, I know we didn't have this in our discussion beforehand, but I did find it interesting when I was there that now you can't work on Sunday, except the big malls, the shopping malls, and of course the latest. I did not set foot in Eastgate. I typically don't set foot in malls.
You didn't?
No.
The main tourist attraction of Skopje? Oh, God. You practically haven't even been to Macedonia.
I've been in Macedonia, been involved in and loving on Macedonia for 26 years, and yet I haven't seen Macedonia because I haven't been to Eastgate Mall.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. You were shaming me now, Cvetin. It's and of course we all know that countries become absolutely fabulously wealthy from building shopping malls. I mean, that's just the way for a country to become rich and wealthy. Yes. So for listeners that may not know, now Sunday is a day off from work. It's a mandatory day off from work, except for restaurants, of course. And the shopping malls are allowed to be open. Conveniently, the shopping malls tend to be associated with Ali Ahmeti and Dewey characters, so they're the ones making money off of that. But I did notice an article here, Nebi Hoja, who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce of Northwestern Macedonia. So that's not the N word, but that's a part of Macedonia. It's that region of Macedonia, the northwestern part. And he said that one company fired 150 of its employees as a result of the law. So whatever the intention of the law, the intention is to make Ali Ahmeti even wealthier and his ilk. It's instead of giving people a day off, people are losing their jobs, which is not a way to build wealth in the country.
Now they have. They also hiked the minimum wage to 300 euros a month, which is a significant increase from under SDSM. They really significantly increased it, and the result is that so far, even before this came into effect, we have we had 60,000 jobs lost. Okay, due to the pandemic as well. Now we can't really trust the statistics. They're coming out now with a report of just 19,000 lost for the pandemic. So maybe they're trying to sell a story of some rebound in the meantime. But either way, it's very clear that this is hurting the businesses even more than on top of what the pandemic is doing. Meanwhile, we have all these programs to borrow money and then distribute it, sprinkle it around to companies for under the guise of COVID aid. This has obviously led to a huge inflation spike in the country. So any increase in salaries or minimum wage is really eaten out even before you receive it. So, yeah, it's a pretty dire situation here economically.
Yeah, and I noticed that. I mean, obviously, every country is facing inflationary pressures right now. After the Fed here declared it was no longer just transitory, it's permanent.
Yeah.
So, but I noticed, just going into the grocery stores there, the restaurants, etc., that it really is going. I mean, then of course, some of my friends were telling me about they just got their electric bill and opened that, and it was like double what it had been the year before. And I don't know how people are coping with that. It's just incredible. But yeah, it doesn't matter if they, of course, and as a small C free market conservative, I don't believe in minimum wages. But anyway, I can set that aside for now. But yeah, people are hurting financially, and again, going back to I know we've talked about this before. Going back to polling, the number one issue consistently in every poll is, what are the major issues that people are dealing with? It's the economy, it's jobs, and that's people need that. But I think if we build more shopping malls in Macedonia, then everybody will be fine.
Yeah.
Oh, but aside from that, let's kind of pivot back to the law on saying naughty words or negative opinions. So the government Ministry of Justice tried to introduce a law which would allow citizens to sue each other for quote unquote negative opinions. I'm not sure. This is always the thing, and we've discussed this before on the Macedonian. Who are we? The Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Thank you. Still jet lagged here. We've discussed the issue of so-called quote unquote hate speech. How do you define hate speech? This is always the problem. How do you define negative opinions? It's very subjective. There's no objective definition of this, and so, for me to call the government bloody little buggers, maybe that is, to them offensive and whatnot. Except that in life there is no right not to be offended. That's just kind of part of growing up and being an adult and etc. So the government walked this back, but there's still, my understanding, they're still trying to figure out a way to work this in. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's very strange. I don't know where it came from, but yeah, they said that first they said they're gonna walk it back under pressure from journalist associations who roundly support them, and just what's left of the critical public in the country. But then they said so the initial phrasing was to extend the definition of slander and insult to expressing negative opinion of someone or some institution, and that would allow this person or institution to sue you for slander under the law on civic accountability. Even the name of the law is very Orwellian. And then now the new idea is to just have it, to rephrase it slightly, so now it says disparaging somebody. So it's not expressing negative opinion, now it's disparaging. Still stupid, still very ugly.
Define. How do you define that? What is disparaging? You have disparaged my good name, sir. I challenge you to a duel.
Exactly.
What is disparaging?
I don't know. I don't know where it came from. The government,
the Ministry of Regulating Speech now defines what is disparaging or negative opinion or slander.
So they've been very big on prosecuting people for attacking, cursing mainly. This is our common trait, we have a lot of colorful curse words and we use them against Zaev and etc. Zaev's people would use them against the opposition as well. But the Zaev regime was using freely the police and the courts. They would just say some 50-year-old person from some village there, we're charging him with incitement, with hate speech, etc. for just writing something on his Facebook, ugly, but obviously not a threat, not an incitement of any realistic proportions. So they would do this a lot. Mm-hmm. I guess now they have a lot of pressure from Bulgaria and Greece to ban hate speech. And any new round of negotiations between Zaev, now Kovacevsky, and the Bulgarians, or whenever a holiday comes and we either have to celebrate it jointly or, it's like a holiday linked to the World War II liberation. So this also creates a lot of back and forth on social media between Macedonians and Bulgarians. You have a torrent of abuse from both sides, like we never had before. I mean, none of this was happening under Gruevski because, the Bulgarians knew that they can gain nothing from provoking us. We obviously can gain nothing from provoking them. We were blocked by Greece anyway, so who cares? So the relations it was not an active, ongoing dispute. Now it's changed. Now it's a very much an active dispute. And I suppose the idea to change this law would be to make it even easier for the courts to go after people who would just, whenever we have this forced joint celebration, this forcing ourselves to be friendly and chummy with the Bulgarians, which many people would reject on both sides, or when they will inevitably veto us again at some point, then people respond with insults against them, that we can go after the Bulgarians, after the critics of Bulgaria with, it's not a criminal charge, but it would still, it's still going to cost you financially. So I guess this is the reason. There is no other good explanation for this. So first round is the government backed off slightly, but I guess they're going to try pushing further if this is really what they want, if this is really the reason to appease Bulgaria.
Well, two things. First of all, if I go up to Kovacevsky and I look him in the eye and I say "Minu perse," which is an Estonian swear word.
Okay.
Is that, does that count as hateful speech? Do I get arrested? Do I get fined? Do I get thrown into jail? Minu perse, Kovacevsky.
Let me just see it in Google Translate what exactly.
It's the worst thing you can say in Estonian. So does it count as, and since I said it in Estonian, does it count as hate speech?
But the Estonians are, like generally well-behaved people. How bad can it be, really? I mean, at least compared to our stuff.
To be perfectly honest, it's the worst thing you can say in Estonian, and yet when you translate it in English, it literally doesn't make any sense because the phrase it literally means you go back up into your own ass. So it doesn't sound that bad. I mean, it's I mean, I suppose
depending on his preference, it might actually be good.
So I think maybe I will adopt the position that I swear in Estonian at these people when I'm there, so I don't get arrested or fined or whatever. But back on, and then the second point on the Bulgarian issue of the hate speech. Who's this idiot in the Bulgarian parliament, Zambezki?
He's in the European Parliament.
He's in the European Parliament,
nationalist,
right?
Karakachonis guy there.
Yeah, he's a moron. He tweeted out today, quote, "Acts of hatred against Bulgarians in Macedonia," emoji flag, "do not cease. After the @VladaMK refused to jointly celebrate Gotse Delchev, the #BG, emoji Bulgarian flag, flowers laid at his grave were demonstratively removed after the departure of the BG delegation. Act of friendship? I don't think so." Well, hang on, dude. First of all, you can't force people to be friends. I mean, that kind of violates the whole point of being a friend if you're forcing people to try and be friends. You can't legislate that. And act of hatred against Bulgarians I don't know if they remove the flowers or not, Okay, so what? Maybe they removed the flowers because they wanted to make room for more flowers. Who knows? But he's an irritating little twat, and I wish he would just go away. Oh, I just used hate speech, I'm sure there. Yeah. So I'm going to be roundly criticized for it.
Yeah. It will just backfire. I mean, there's inevitably going to be anonymous bad actors. Even why wouldn't there be? If people notice that this is provoking new rounds of hatred and tensions and blockades between Macedonia and Bulgaria, obviously more people are going to jump into the fray. Maybe people from abroad, maybe people deliberately paid to do this. Or, I can put myself in the mind frame of people who would even do this, out of outrage, out of, they had a family drama during the Second World War. there was a lot of atrocities on both sides. I mean, both by the Serbs and by the Bulgarians. Macedonians were not much in a position to do anything to anybody. So there is a lot on. Every family has a story of some atrocity, and I know bunches of people who just do not want to be pushed around on this issue and who would take to social media to respond. And if this drags, leads to Bulgaria blocking us further, a lot of them would do it just because of that.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's just kind of the pushback. I mean, we see this around the world. Of course, I understand that Europeans don't value free speech as much as we Americans do. Actually, nobody on the planet values free speech as much as the Americans do. And yet, free speech is under attack all over the place. Just ask Joe Rogan. So maybe we should send Joe Rogan to Macedonia.
Well, actually, he's being invited at the Macedonian YouTube channel, practically on Rumble. The Macedonian-owned.
Chris Pavlovsky.
Chris Pavlovsky invited him to switch for.
Well, fantastic. So.
Chris, by the way, this podcast is also available. If with the leftover you have after paying off Joe Rogan,
Absolutely.
You can feel free to buy us as well.
That's true. Yes, we've got 100. This is episode 132 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, and let's see, what is today? Today's the 8th, February 8th.
Mm-hmm.
I think this will drop later today. It's been a while, I know, since we've recorded. Lots of issues going on. Lots of other things to do, but I am glad that we were able to do this. What else? I see. I know, again, we didn't talk about this in our pre-podcast conversations, but apparently there's a group of Greek hackers who are trying to delete Macedonia, delete the country from the internet.
Yeah.
Not entirely sure how you do that.
I wish to rest a little from the internet.
Exactly. But yeah.
When I used to work in a printed newspaper, it would just be done with the day by 15 o'clock by 3 in the afternoon.
Isn't it funny, Cvetin? Because more and more technology takes over our lives, and I remember when I was a little kid. This is about 4,000 years ago. They were saying that the authorities said that one day there will be the paperless office, and we'll have more leisure time and all that. It just doesn't seem like it. It seems like with more technology comes more exhaustion, frankly.
Yeah.
So, and having to keep up with everything. But
So do your worst, Greeks.
I'm sorry?
Do your worst.
Do your worst, exactly. Yes. So, right. All right. What else we got here? It's been a while since we've talked. A couple of weeks, I think, actually.
Well, I think you have a farmer's pick prepared, so we can go with that to close up the podcast.
Yes. And we can kind of expand on this a little bit more because we've been talking about depressing things and crushing morosity.
Yeah.
Kind of the commentary podcast. That's their brand, and it seems to be our brand. But we do want to talk about positive things now and then. And actually, we need to get back in that habit of talking about something positive in Macedonia. And so I got a farmer's pick. And actually, so Twitter can be useful for some things. And, before I came over to Macedonia, it's true that it can be. It's a tool. Before I came to Macedonia, I noticed on the hashtag Macedonia feed, somebody had posted a picture of a bottle of wine, Namchevsky Vranets. And I had never seen that before. I never heard of that winery. And so I followed the guy, and he followed me back, and I DM'd him and said, what is this wine? And so he said he said the shop is called Wineberries. It's actually Wineberry, 2 words, bistro shop in the center of Skopje, actually just down the street from the Bulgarian embassy, right next to Vero, across the street from that. But it's Wineberry. They've got a Facebook page, Wineberry, WINEBERRYMK. And it is, Cvetin, it is a gem. The proprietor, Jadranka Yatsi, has worked with Stoby and Skovin wineries for many, many years, and she opened up the shop. About half her selection is foreign wines, so, there's a little bit from California, South Africa, Australia, France, etc. But the other half are Macedonian wineries you've never heard of. It is amazing. she's got about 27 wineries in her stock, and little wineries like Namchevsky. The Vranets Brik was incredible. And it's a very big, bold, jammy Vranets, as Vranets tends to be, at 17%. But I tasted over a period of about 3 or 4 days. And here's the thing. You go in there and you can just do a taste. So it's just, it's typical of you going to wineries here in the States and wine tastings where they'll just pour you just a little bit and no charge for the taste. And you can taste, she has many bottles open that she's been pouring, throughout the day or whatever, reds, whites, rosés, etc. And you can just do a taste, and if you like it, you can order a glass, or you can order the whole bottle. And there's a few tables and chairs. You can sit down and talk. It's very intimate, and she's got a couple of meza plates that you can get to go with your wines. And the price range is very affordable. Some of the wines from these small Macedonian wineries are running, 300, 350 dinars, all the way up to 800, 1800 dinars, and in between.
With this inflation, seriously?
Yeah, no, the Namchevsky Vransbrik, I think, was 560 dinars. So that's in line with a Tikvesh special selection or something like that. And that's the thing, she doesn't carry the Tikvesh, Bovin, Skoben, Stoby. She doesn't carry the big wineries, only the small ones. And again, these wineries that you've never heard about. So in about 3 days, prepare yourself. Over a course of about 3 days, I tasted 41 Macedonian wines.
Oh my God.
Yes. I will be posting the pictures later on Facebook, later this week, I think. Some of them, not all of them.
That's approaching 12-step level.
Now, again, these are tastes. This is less than an ounce, which I don't know what an ounce is in the metric. I can't remember. But it's just a little pour. So, but it was fantastic. And it started one day with the reds, then went in for the whites, and then the next day was the rosés, including the Stanushina. But, the stories, and actually it's interesting because her tagline is a different wine story. And each wine has its own story, and each winemaker has their own story. And this is just a great example of something good coming out of Macedonia. First of all, you've got all these wineries in Macedonia that nobody's ever heard of. And Yahtzee said, I think there's like 120 wineries now registered in Macedonia. I can name, with the ones that I had and the ones that I already know about, I can name about 40, I think. I don't know where the other 80 are.
Yeah,
but
and
some of
maybe 15, I guess.
Yeah, and some of these are, open to the public and things like that. A lot of them down in Cvetin, but some down in other places like Gevgelia. So I tasted a dessert wine, kind of like a port, fortified wine. Again, two different ones made from Vranets, from this winery in Gevgelia called Kerem, Kerem. And the one, the really big, bold, strong one was 21% ABV. And it tasted like Christmas. It had flavors, notes of nutmeg, vanilla, cinnamon. And that's just natural from the aging process and from the process of really, I guess, I don't know what, I'm losing my ability to describe the grapes. It's almost like raisins that you take and then you ferment them, crush them and ferment them. But it was just fantastic. And there's just so many. Another one, a grape called, I believe, I may have this wrong, I believe called Plovdina. And that's the grape name. Never heard of it before.
Okay.
And little plots around Macedonia that have been discovered and cultivated and grown. And it was a rosé, a very light rosé. It's fantastic. But so many good wines to be tried there. And so many good wines made in Macedonia that are waiting to be discovered by Macedonians. And I was telling everybody I met there that Wineberry exists and that they should go and try it. And I look forward to seeing new wines next time I go back to Macedonia, new wines that Wineberry has. And so that is my farmer's pick, a good news story from Macedonia, Wineberry, and all of the little wineries in Macedonia that you've never heard about. But will soon if you go there and try them.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'll definitely give it a shot and hope our listeners do as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will try and get more on a regular
do this
schedule
more
again.
often.
Yeah, exactly. So, but hopefully we'll get this dropped today, and we'll just keep monitoring all this and sampling those wines.
Try not to insult anybody. For the love of God.
Too late. All right.
Okay.
Good talking to you, Cvetin.
You too. Take care.
You too.